House will be in order. House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 936, I call up S1071 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1071, an act to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to disinter the remains of Ferdinando V. Cota from Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery, Texas, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 936, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 119-16 is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services or their respective designees. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama. Before you begin. House will be in order. Gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on S1071.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to present the final National Defense Authorization Act of fiscal year 2026. This is a good product that was worked in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion. This year we focused a lot of our efforts on fixing the Pentagon's broken acquisition process, which is failing our warfighters. The fiscal year 26 NDAA includes a series of reforms to put commercial solutions first, eliminate regulatory burdens, and end bureaucratic inertia. It also puts in place a system that will deliver capability to the warfighter at the speed and scale that we need. Fixing acquisitions will go a long way toward ensuring our warfighters are the most capable fighting force on the planet. Properly equipping our warfighters is critical, but so is ensuring we recruit and retain the best and brightest. Toward that end, the FY26 NDAA continues to make improvements in the quality of life of all of our service members. This bill supports the Trump administration's 3.8% pay raise for all service members. It authorizes nearly $3 billion for construction of barracks, family housing, dining facilities, medical facilities, child care centers, and schools. And it also improves the service member access to mental health services. Our committee will continue to make improving the quality of life of our service members a top priority every year. We need a ready, capable, and lethal fighting force because the threats to our nation, especially those from China, are more complex and challenging than at any point in the last 40 years. The FY26 NDA counters the threat from China and ensures mission success in the Indo-Pacific. The bill includes a number of provisions to rid adversaries from our defense supply chain. It extends the Pacific Defense Initiative, enhances the U.S. posture in the region, and improves our ability to conduct military operations in the Pacific. It also bolsters Taiwan's defenses and helps build the capacity of our allies in the region. Furthermore, this bill increases the lethality of our forces to prepare for and deter global threats. The bill authorizes over $26 billion in shipbuilding for additional submarines and surface vessels, $38 billion to ensure air dominance with new generation fighter jets, and $25 billion to restore America's arsenal of munitions, $145 billion to research and develop innovative new technologies our warfighters will need to win on future battlefields. This is a strong bipartisan bill that delivers for our warfighters and deters our adversaries. It will fundamentally reform the defense acquisition enterprise. It will continue historic improvements in the quality of life of our service members and their families, and it will build the ready, capable, lethal fighting force we need to deter China and our adversaries, and it will deliver on President Trump's peace through strength agenda. I urge all members to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield myself 4 minutes. Mr.
Gentleman's
Chairman.
recognized.
Thank you. I also support this bill, and I really want to thank Chairman Rogers, the committee, staff, House, Senate. This has truly been a bipartisan process. I'm not in love with everything in the bill. There's some other things I would have liked to have seen included, but I really compliment Chairman Rogers and the majority staff for having worked with us throughout that process and worked with the Senate. I thought we had a very good bicameral, bipartisan agreement this year. And the Chairman's right. The highlight of this bill is acquisition reform, something that our committee has worked on for quite some time. But the last 2 years in particular, we have been really focused on how to get this right. And this is the most ambitious swing at acquisition reform that we've taken. And I know that can sound sort of dry. Acquisition reform doesn't exactly excite people, but it's really important because what it's about is getting the Pentagon to be able to buy the equipment, the innovative equipment that it needs to adapt quickly so that our warfighters can have what they need to meet the challenges of the modern battlefield. Way too slow right now, too many programs way over budget, not delivering as advertised. Speeding up that process and delivering a better product is an enormous priority for this country to meet our national security needs, and this bill does that. And the House really led on that, and I think it's really important. There are other key aspects of this bill. We have others outside of the jurisdiction of the NDAA who are part of this, including Coast Guard reauthorization, Foreign Affairs reauthorization, and the Intel Committee's reauthorization. Those are important to meet our national security needs as well. There's also a very important component on countering UAS domestically, the threat that drones pose to many of our military installations and other sensitive areas in the country is a real problem. This bill takes a step towards trying to address that. I'm also very pleased that this bill does, I think, a meaningful job of trying to reassert some legislative authority, to truly be the co-equal branch of government that we say we are. We show strong support for Ukraine with $400 million in USAI. We block the president's misbegotten efforts to pull troops out of Eastern Europe in this moment and really reassert the ability of our committee to exercise oversight. We have a fence on the travel budget for Secretary Hegseth until he follows the law and releases the videos for all of the boat strikes that are going on right now in Latin America, and also until he gets us the execute orders that by law he is supposed to get to us. We also have a requirement in here that if any senior level military officer is going to be fired, Congress has to be notified and a reason has to be given. So overall, I think this bill is a good balance of the interests of both sides, in the Senate and the House as well. It's a good product that we should be supportive of, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Mr. Speaker, this time I yield 3 minutes to Mr. Fallon of Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank your ranking member as well. They did a wonderful job on this, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. This NDAA contains substantial wins for service members and their families and continues the committee's tradition of improving the quality of life of service members and their families by authorizing a 3.8% pay raise, expanding child care, increasing family separation allowances, expanding and reauthorizing special pays and bonuses, and expanding convalescent leave. This bill also bans cell phones in DODEA schools, prevents the downsizing or closing of child care centers without congressional notification, expands access to health care, prevents the elimination of uniformed doctors, increases access to specialty care, and authorizes over $335 million to renovate and build new medical centers, hospitals, and clinics. And more importantly, this bill puts the final nail in the coffin of the Biden DOD's woke bureaucracy. The FY26 NDAA includes essential reforms that we all know are essential to refocus our military on warfighting and lethality by codifying the President's executive order, ending radical and wasteful government, diversity, equity, inclusion, better known as DEI, their programs and preferencing, eliminating statutory provisions relating to DEI in the Department of War, and requiring all command selections to be based, wait for it, on individual merit and demonstrative performance rather than race, ethnicity, or sex. Those categories would be immaterial. Mr. Chairman, I urge the passage of this bipartisan NDAA so we can deliver on our promises to service members and their families, making our warfighters lethal, better trained, and more prepared to the future fight, while ensuring their quality of life is the standard Americans expect us to provide their brave warriors. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield back.
Not reserved.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut and the ranking member of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, Mr. Courtney.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2025, with the growing global maritime threats, it's particularly important for Congress to exercise its constitutional mandate to, quote, provide and maintain a Navy. The Sea Power portion of this bill accomplished that goal. For example, the bill includes a plus-up of $5 billion to shipbuilding above the administration's request, including $1.9 billion to address glaring OMB budget request shortfalls in the Virginia submarine account. The Sea Power Subcommittee also strengthened the industrial base by replenishing last year's wage improvement authorities with $615 million new dollars to continue progress in hiring a new generation of shipyard workers in the metal trades. For the Columbia-class program, the Navy's #1 priority, the bill again fixes another glaring OMB blunder, which short-funded Columbia in both the reconciliation bill and last month's continuing resolution. The subcommittee provides Navy with contracting authority for 5 new Columbia subs with incremental funding authority, eliminating the risk of a stop work order, which came close to happening because of the Columbia omission in last month's CR. The bill also authorizes a boost to Sealift, the new Marine Corps landing ship program with a vessel construction manager model, and the 4th Ford class aircraft carrier. I'm proud of the strong bipartisan support for allies and partners in the bill, the $400 million refill of the Ukraine Security Initiative, and streamlining exports to our AUKUS partners. Last week, the Pentagon's AUKUS review endorsed that security agreement, and this bill's massive commitment to the submarine industrial base and export reforms will keep us on track to sell 3 Virginia-class submarines starting in 2032 to our great ally, Australia. I want to thank my Sea Power Subcommittee colleagues, particularly Chairman Trent Kelly, for their outstanding bipartisan work, as well as the subcommittee staff, Phil McNaughton, Kyle Noyes, Kelly Goggin, and Abby Snyder. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Washington reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to open by complimenting my friend, Majority Leader Steve Scalise, on the very dapper Ole Miss tie he's wearing that he lost in a bet when my Ole Miss Rebels beat his LSU Tigers earlier this year. I rise today in strong support of this year's NDAA. I want to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their leadership on the critical acquisition reforms in this bill. I also want to thank my good friend, Sea Power Ranking Member Joe Courtney, for his dedication in supporting our naval and projection forces. America's Navy and Air Force are incredible assets for our country, protecting critical interests and projecting our presence around the world. In the face of increasingly audacious threats to order from adversaries scattered across the globe, sending the message that America is committed to peace through strength is more important than ever. This year's bill supports and strengthens our ability to continue this noble and vital mission. This NDAA will add to our fleet of Virginia and Columbia-class submarines. We are also investing in future procurement of ships and submarines and granting authorities to support our industrial base and improve the acquisitions process for the future. This year's NDAA also shapes the investment in the transformative power of unmanned vehicles. These are just some of the critical provisions in the NDAA, not just for the Navy of today, but for the Navy of tomorrow. This bill also supports our airborne force projection, raising the minimum number of aerial refueling aircraft, maintaining a strong inventory of C-130 aircraft for intra-theater airlift, and supporting cutting-edge aerial drone programs. As with our ships and submarines, we are paving a smoother towards building a projection force of the future. I want to thank my staff and the staff of the committee. I thank the general for recognizing me, and I want to thank my fellow, Bobby Sue, Commander Bobby Sue, who did an outstanding job in working on this NDA. I ask support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm now pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Readiness, Mr. Garamendi of California.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I stand here a little bit confused. I want to support this bill, but at the same time, the work that we have put in on the Readiness Subcommittee dealing with the ability of the troops to have clean barracks and to be ready to deal with the issues that are out there, there are many things going on that are troublesome. And it may be time for all of us to just take a deep breath and go, wait a minute, what's happening here? There are extrajudicial killings going on in the middle of an ocean. Military aircraft is used for deportation. Secretary Hegseth and the President are eroding our military readiness while advancing their ambitions. At a moment when this administration is dangerously close to dragging us into a disastrous and unauthorized war in Venezuela, this bill does not, unfortunately, push forward the appropriate role of the Congress to carry out its funding as well as our oversight responsibility. Many provisions of this bill that we worked hard for on the Readiness Subcommittee, child development, infrastructure, barracks, and even in my own district. But it's not enough. The administration's threatened war with our NATO allies, purged senior officers and career military lawyers without cause. They deployed the National Guard into U.S. cities over the objections of local city leaders, entered into a conflict with Iran without congressional authorization, diverted resources from critical military needs to fund immigration enforcement. All of this, and I haven't even begun to talk about my favorite subject of the nuclear arsenal. And we can spend a lot of time on that. I'd like to vote for this bill, but I can't. I just can't. It's time for all of us to take a moment and say, wait a minute, we're the Congress of the United States. This bill, while it does many things, does not assert congressional authority as it should be. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the chairman and the ranking member of this committee for their thoughtful leadership in navigating us towards passing this bill. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 3838, the streamlining procurement for effective execution, delivery, and National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. This NDAA emphasizes ensuring the lethality of the U.S. Armed Services by reforming the acquisition process to deliver innovative equipment to the warfighter at speed and scale. It does so by accelerating the requirements process to reduce decision timelines from 3 years to 3 months, by making other transaction authorities more easily available for prototyping, and by cutting red tape through eliminating duplicative cost reporting requirements. As the chairman of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Info Technologies, and Innovation, we have worked tirelessly to deliver the best and most cutting-edge technology to our service members. To that end, this bill authorizes $142.6 billion for research, development, testing, and evaluation to field essential technologies like hypersonics, AI, and autonomous vehicles to win the wars of tomorrow. China has a cyber force that is 10 times that of the United States. China and Russia are attacking our networks every day. The threat in the cyberspace domain is real, and this legislation reflects that reality and takes essential steps to address it. I want to thank the outstanding subcommittee staff that made this possible. Sarah Moxley, Karen Curley, Andrew Smith, Brooke Allred, Maria Giredo, and Michael Herman and Wendell White. Specifically, this NDA helps small businesses by fast-tracking promising technologies, establishing a pilot program to test and procure technologies that bolster operational capabilities, incentivizing the consideration of commercial, off-the-shelf products prior to entering expensive contracts, and authorizing the Defense Innovation Unit to develop regional outreach centers. The FY26 NDA is a strong bill that prioritizes our national security through common sense, acquisition reform, and innovation at scale. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Now reserved.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm now pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, Mr. Norcross of New Jersey.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Smith, and to Chairman Rogers for 60-plus years working on this piece of legislation and those before us to make sure we get it done on behalf of America. So that long, proud tradition of bipartisan work by our subcommittee on tactical air and land forces, with special thanks to my chairman, Chairman Whitman, and his staff, that we all work together and have a commitment to make sure we get this done. Mr. Speaker, this bill addresses affordability and achievability of the current and future modernization requirements while continuing the oversight necessary to ensure reasonable execution of these programs that include all our tactical aircraft programs, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, tactical munitions. This bill also includes a subcommittee multi-year effort to manage the largest acquisition program in the history of the Department of Defense. Yes, that's the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. This year, the bill extends by 5 years the annual government accountability report on the F-35. We have done many things for the F-35 oversight in the past 2 years, and very proud of the way we're bringing it back to where it needs to be. As we continue to wage war against so many of those who will do our country harm, the one good thing we can say is we work together. And finally, we want to thank those subcommittee professional staff for their hard work, including Jay Valerio, Michael Curlin, Heath Boat, Caroline, Brooke, Andrew, and certainly to my own personal staff, Assistant Robin Dickey, Defense Fellow Brian Lee, and certain Sam. As we finish up this is going to be an incredibly important vote for the history of our country. And I want to thank all those involved. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This time I'd like to yield 2.5 minutes to the Chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee.
Thank you,
Gentleman's
Chairman
recognized for
Rogers.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and Ranking Member Seth Moulton on Strat Forces. I rise today in support of the compromise bill for fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. This bill continues the fundamental reforms of defense acquisition that started in our committee and supports a fighting force that will stand against those who threaten the United States of America. As the chair of the Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, I'm proud the compromise product builds on the subcommittee's work to enhance our national security space capabilities, strengthen our nuclear forces, and expand our missile defense, all critical elements of our national security. First and foremost, this bill supports the continued modernization of our nation's nuclear triad, our nuclear command and control systems, and the scientific capabilities that maintain our nuclear stockpile. We also establish a new rapid capabilities program within the National Nuclear Security Administration to enhance our ability to respond to growing nuclear threats from China and Russia. Our adversaries, China in particular, continue to rapidly develop and deploy new nuclear weapons, while U.S. nuclear capabilities can take over a decade to design, develop, and produce. This bill will apply innovative and rapid acquisition approaches to keep pace with the dynamic threat environment and ensure our nation continues to field a nuclear deterrent that is second to none. For the defense of this homeland, the bill supports development of the Golden Dome system to achieve President Trump's bold vision. It also includes multi-year procurement authority and additional resources to expand production of critical missile defense interceptors. In space, we push to sustain the growth and development of Space Force Guardians. We must ensure we have the highly skilled and technically proficient acquisition cadre capable of bringing online the next generation of systems necessary to fight and win in space. As we develop those space systems, we're going to need both better trained acquisition guardians and more of them. The Joint Force will be looking to these professionals to deliver significant portions of the Golden Dome architecture. This bill helps them do that. We also ensure that the national security launch enterprise is led by one individual that has the authority to make decisions and make trades to support the warfighter. This bill revitalizes the defense industrial base and American manufacturing, supports a well-deserved pay raise for our service members, creates more lethal and agile force to counter our adversaries, and secures our nation's borders, all while saving taxpayers over $20 billion through cutting inefficient programs and government bureaucracy. This is a compromise bill that meets the moment and the need to support our warfighters and protect our nation. I applaud the work for this committee and bring forth a strong bipartisan bill. I encourage all my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back the remainder of my time to the chairman.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on Cyber Information Technologies and Innovation, Mr. Khanna of California.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Smith. Mr. Speaker, as our country wastes trillions of dollars in wars overseas, the American people are frustrated and saying, why is it that we're doing that while China, with its Silk Belt Initiative, is building its industrial base? They want us investing not in wars overseas. They want us investing in manufacturing here at home, in healthcare here at home, in childcare here at home. And as we debate this bill, President Trump is announcing that he has seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. People voted for President Trump because he was going to end the endless wars. This Congress must stand up against another war in Venezuela like we had in Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya. The American people do not want a regime change war in Venezuela. And Mr. Speaker, while I have such tremendous respect for the chairman of the committee and the ranking member, it's not enough for Pete Hegseth to come and just testify behind closed doors. I trust their judgment, but we need an accountability and a full hearing where Pete Hegseth answers to the American people for what happened off the coast of Venezuela. It's not the American way of doing business of killing people who are unarmed. That may be how Putin acts. That may be how Xi Jinping acts. That's not how America acts. And I know there are Republicans on this committee who are concerned about how Hegseth has acted. We need Hegseth before the Armed Services Committee answering to the American people, and shame on him for throwing under the bus an admiral. The admiral has far more honor than Pete Hegseth has. We need him to give answers to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I urge this committee and Congress to listen to the American people and stop getting us into endless wars.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Tactical Air Land Subcommittee, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of S1071, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. I'd like to thank my friend, colleague, and ranking member, Don Norcross, for all of his great work on this effort. You know, this year the NDA placed an extraordinary emphasis on overhauling the acquisition process, shifting focus from compliance to quickly fielding new capabilities at speed and scale. It slashes red tape by creating new requirements processes to enable the Pentagon to actively seek existing technology solutions from industry rather than prescribing overly exquisite gold-plated systems with burdensome requirements. This year's bill also fully funds the President's request for counter-drone systems, improves force protection for drones at home and abroad, and codifies the Joint Interagency Task Force 401, responsible for coordinating all department efforts to counter drones now and in the future. Among the NDA's most important achievements this year is the authorization of $38 billion for development, procurement, and modification of aircraft. This includes full funding for the Air Force's F-47 and the Navy's FA-XX sixth-generation aircraft programs, as well as 47 additional F-35 aircraft. These investments will guarantee America's air superiority around the globe. The legislation also supports shipbuilding, an additional Virginia-class submarine, and a third Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine. Additionally, the bill contains block buy authorization that allows the Navy to purchase 2 Ford-class aircraft carriers under the same contract. This bill is a product of a long and thoughtful deliberative process aimed at rapidly arming our American warfighters with the most innovative and productive technology available. It delivers on this in an astounding fashion. I'd like to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their thoughtful leadership on this essential piece of legislation. I'd also like to thank my subcommittee staff, Michael Curlin, Heath Bope, Caroline Curley, Brooke Allred, and Andrew Smith, and also in my office, my lead military legislative assistant, Andrew Maloney, and the Department of War, United States Marine Corps, Captain Alex Feldman. And I urge my colleagues to support this year's NDAA, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the HASC Subcommittee on Military Personnel, Ms. Houlihan of Pennsylvania.
Gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill before us is a bipartisan compromise that continues our work to improve the quality of life of our service members and their families. And I want to thank the chair and ranking member for working so diligently to bring this forward. At the heart of our national security are the people whose courage, skill, and integrity make every mission possible, and this legislation recognizes their value. With a 3.8% pay raise, an increase in the family separation allowance, and other provisions that will help ease the financial pressures of military families. It also extends a child care in your home pilot through 2029 and requires annual reviews of child care fee assistance. We also included protections I championed for Department of Defense civilians workforce, barring arbitrary layoffs for DoDEA teachers and child care staff, and shielding public shipyard employees from reductions in force and hiring freezes. I'm very grateful that this bill moves forward a reform that I've worked on for years, authorizing automatic selective service registration for eligible men, making the system more fair and efficient. And I'm especially proud that this legislation codifies the women's initiatives teams across all services. Women serve and they lead in every domain of our military, and we cannot let Secretary Hegseth sideline them. Making WITS permanent ensures that each branch can continue to identify the barriers and remove those barriers to women's recruitment, retention, and health and safety. I do all this and support this bill despite my extreme lack of confidence in this Pentagon's leadership. But I always must support the men and women who wear this uniform. Our service members and their families make extraordinary sacrifices for our nation, and now, especially now, we must fulfill our commitments to them. With my remaining time, I would also like, with very much respect to the ranking member and chairman, to echo Mr. Khan in imploring a full committee hearing for HASC with Secretary Hegseth and a full committee hearing for the Intel Committee with the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, because we absolutely, collectively, all must have the oversight and the understanding of what's going on in Venezuela and the attacks in the open Caribbean. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington Reserves, gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, the gentleman from Michigan, General Bergman.
Gentleman from Michigan recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank the chairman for yielding. I'm impressed with our nation's will to face down potential aggressors. From protecting the shipping lanes in the Red Sea to using sea power to protect our allies, to securing our nation's borders, and finally to projecting power to strike a nuclear-ready Iran, our military continues to be up to the task. Our service members should be commended on their professionalism and commitment, but we have much more to do to better prepare. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026 continues to press needed reform to make our military more lethal and ready. Accelerating the acquisition cycle, slaying a bloated military construction process, delivering environmental stewardship to communities impacted by PFAS, and providing quality housing for our service members, this bill is essential to keeping trust with our service members and their families. And this bill is laser-focused on the future to ensure our forces have the training, maintenance, and equipment to deliver a credible future deterrent that prevents any would-be aggressors. Undoubtedly, this bill is worthy of your support. Before I conclude, I want to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their steadfast support and leadership in delivering this bill. Our national security is stronger when we work across the aisle and deliver common-sense outcomes for our nation. I urge all members to vote yes. I yield back the balance of my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves, gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am now pleased to yield 1 minute to the Vice Ranking Member of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Davis of North Carolina.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, and to the Chair and the Ranking Member, thank you for your work, your leadership that's got us here today. To the Ranking Member, also thank you for yielding time. I stand in strong support of the 2026 NDAA. It's an essential piece of legislation that underscores our commitment to ensuring that we uphold safety and security of the American people. The 2026 NDAA is a reflection of many of our priorities. When we talk about priorities, especially in Eastern North Carolina, I visited our Child Development Center, and we see in here part of the funds that's going to help Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, as well as when I think about the work that's needed at Cherry Point, there's specific efforts that just helps this community through the Flight Line Utilities Modernization Project. But let me say, what really is important is when we talk about affordability, to see this pay raise for the men and women who are serving us well, 3.8%. This is going to help them at the checkout counter. So I stand in full support. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington Reserves, gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Jackson.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026 today. I would like to thank Chairman Rogers for his leadership in bringing this critical piece of legislation, vital to the national security of our nation, to the floor for the 65th consecutive year. This year's NDAA puts our warfighters first by streamlining procurement and ensuring they receive the capabilities needed to counter the increasingly sophisticated actions of our adversaries, particularly the People's Republic of China. Through the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee, we were able to ensure our Special Operations Forces, the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, and the Defense Security Cooperation Agency have the tools required to execute the Department's efforts in strategic competition and countering malign influence. Additionally, I'm extremely proud to have championed the SOCOM Urgent Technologies and Capabilities Pilot Program, which ensures our special operators receive the technology and equipment they need to meet and defeat emerging threats. This is an essential bill for America's national defense, and I urge my colleagues to support it. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time to Chairman Rogers.
And I reserve.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Mr. Himes of Connecticut.
Gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the hardworking chairman and ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. I rise in support of the FY26 National Defense Authorization Act. Importantly, the bill reforms the outdated acquisition process at the Department of Defense. It provides a pay raise for our service members, supports our allies in Europe, including Ukraine, and takes other steps to strengthen our security. I'm pleased that this bill includes the Intelligence Authorization Act, and I thank again the chairman and the ranking member. I want to thank Chairman Crawford and all members and staff of the House Intelligence Committee who contributed to this important legislation. In both the unclassified text and the classified annex, the bill enhances congressional oversight of the intelligence community to ensure they conduct their work effectively, efficiently, and within the bounds of law. Among other provisions, it increases oversight of the FBI terrorist watch listing process, requires the NSA to notify Congress of significant changes in its collection posture, and improves our visibility in counter-narcotics-related operations. It requires each IC element to designate a senior official to oversee work on biotechnology issues, an emerging priority. It also extends the requirement that there be an IC coordinator to ensure accountability for Russian atrocities and adds Russia's forcible transfer of Ukrainian children to the list of matters under the coordinator's purview. It requires each IC agency to develop metrics for the adoption of critical emerging technology. Finally, it provides a narrowly tailored authority to CIA to protect its domestic facilities from unmanned drones, a gap in the law that we have been seeking to close for more than 5 years. Once again, I appreciate the strong bipartisan efforts on the IAA as well as the NDAA, and I'm pleased to support the final product and yield back.
Gentleman from Washington reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of S-1071, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2025, which includes the Coast Guard Authorization of 2025, which is bipartisan legislation to authorize appropriations for the Coast Guard for fiscal years 2026 and 2027. This bill will allow the Coast Guard to continue its vital mission of defending our maritime borders, saving lives at sea, and ensuring safe and reliable maritime commerce. The measure also builds upon the historic $25 billion investment the Coast Guard received in reconciliation, providing necessary oversight and much-needed support for the service's ongoing efforts to capitalize its cutter and air assets and shoreline facilities and its IT capabilities. As the Coast Guard faces increased demand for its services, the bill authorizes service to grow to 55,000 active duty members by 2027 and supports the training, assets, and programs necessary to attract, retain, and advance the personnel needed to carry out the Coast Guard's missions. To that end, the bill ensures the morale, well-being, and safety of our Coast Guard personnel, which are provided from the day that they enter boot camp to the day that they retire. In line with President Trump's efforts to rebuild America's maritime capability, this bill strengthens America's maritime base, including provisions that streamline the merchant mariner credentialing process and laying the groundwork for responsible deployment of new technologies at sea.
Through this legislation, the United States Coast Guard will possess the assets and personnel it needs to execute its safety, enforcement, and national security missions. Finally, I want to thank the committee's ranking member, Rick Larson, Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation Committee Subcommittee Chairman Mike Ezell, and Ranking Member Salud Carbajal for their hard work on this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'd urge my colleagues to support S-1071 with I yield back to Chairman Rogers the remaining amount of my time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm now pleased to yield 1 minute to a member of the House Armed Services Committee, Ms. Jacobs of California.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to share a story from Lydia, an Army wife who desperately wants IVF coverage. Speaker Johnson, I hope you're listening because you just stole her dreams to build a family by removing my bipartisan and bicameral provision from this year's NDAA. Here's what Lydia said, and I'm quoting, "The very job that injured my husband and caused his infertility, his service to his country, also denies him the medical treatment he needs to become a parent. IVF isn't a luxury for us, it's the only medical path we have to conceive, and TRICARE completely ignores that reality. My husband served 11 deployments, survived a brain injury, and has continued to serve, but we're told the cost of growing our family is ours alone to carry." Lydia and her husband have tried everything to conceive. They've already done 9 rounds of IUI, and since they can't afford IVF out of pocket, they've considered leaving the military and even divorcing to get coverage in another state. Speaker Johnson is forcing this reality on Lydia and many more military families by refusing IVF coverage. And it's especially hypocritical when his own staff has access to this care. This is one of the reasons why I will vote no on the final NDAA, but this fight isn't over. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to a great member of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Moylan of Guam.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the FY 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, and to also thank the chairman and minority leader and my House Armed Services Committee colleagues for crafting a bill for the people of Guam in mind. The bill advances a package of legislation addressing the War Department's special relationship with Guam's economy, provisions allowing the department to more aggressively hire Guam locals and work more effectively with the island businesses included. Bill also generates over $1 billion of economic activity for Guam and makes good on the Pentagon's responsibility to invest in the island's infrastructure. In addition to the pro-affordability policies, the NDAA addresses my constituents' environmental concerns and keeps Guam in a position to lead the way for the nation as Golden Dome is built out. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to a member of the House Armed Services Committee, Ms. Elfreth of Maryland.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first start by thanking Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for their leadership. I came to Congress wanting to join the Armed Services Committee in particular because it is one of the few committees that still works together to collaborate and legislate. We don't always agree on every position, as reflected in this year's bill and even in this floor debate, but the final product before us represents the bipartisan nature in which the committee is run, and the wins within the NDAA are proof. It represents the work that my friend on the other side of the aisle, Representative Schmidt, and I collaboratively put into improving availability and accessibility of health care for veterans at DoD facilities, including the world-renowned Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in my state of Maryland. The bill also means the United States Naval Academy and all military academies will be better equipped to brace for the impacts of extreme weather and sea level rise, and I worked on that with Mr. Whitman. The bill delivers a well-deserved pay increase for our service members and ensures DoD cannot arbitrarily RIF its employees. This bill includes crucial support for our allies like Ukraine and provides critical checks on this administration's power. I spent most of this year, including yesterday, visiting every military installation in Maryland, meeting with and listening to service members of all ranks. It helped inform my priorities, and today I'm proud to stand before this chamber requesting my colleagues support this bill. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to an outstanding member of the Armed Services Committee, Ms. Kiggins of Virginia.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, this NDAA delivers the investments and reforms our service members deserve, improving readiness, modernizing our forces, and strengthening the foundation of America's national defense. The bill revitalizes our defense industrial base, strengthens American shipbuilding, and supports the workforce that keeps our Navy and Joint Force mission ready. These investments deliver for our nation, and they deliver for Hampton Roads, home to the sailors, shipbuilders, and military families who sustain our national security every single day. It invests directly in the men and women who wear the uniform by improving pay, strengthening housing, expanding child care, and ensuring access to timely, high-quality health care. It also makes targeted improvements to training, capabilities, and modernization so our force remains the world's premier fighting force. The fiscal year 26 NDAA builds a stronger military, a more resilient industrial base, a more secure nation. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
Now reserved.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm now pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Meeks of New York.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith in the manner of which they work together in a bipartisan way. It is an example of what has taken place here for almost 60 years, where we come together for this legislation. I will just throw it in, though. I would love the day when the state authorization bill stands on its own and we wouldn't have to put it. So I look for and long for that day. But let me just start with what I believe is good in the bill that was negotiated. The Iraq War ended more than a decade ago. Yet presidents from both parties have cited the 2002 authorization for use of military force, or the AUMF, to justify military actions completely unrelated to Iraq. Leaving it on the books invites future presidents to drag us into reckless foreign wars, and the American people do not want those wars. And Congress has not yet authorized those wars, or will not. They have to come to Congress to give us that power. So I'm honored to take the baton from former Congressmember Barbara Lee in carrying this legislation forward, and I want to thank the cross-lead across the aisle, Representative Roy, for getting this past the finish line. This bill also includes legislation like the Haiti Criminal Collusion Transparency Act, which would curb the flow of illegal arms and fueling Haiti's crises and hold accountable those that elites enabling it. They have been put into check. It restores the State Department's Office of Haitian Affairs, in a bipartisan way, and the NDAA preserves bipartisan initiatives like the Rangel, Payne, and Pickering and Veterans Innovation Fellowship at the State Department. There are, of course, some things in here that I don't agree with, and I wish we could have gotten in. You know, I wanted a stronger DFC, which is dealing with its core development mission, and not give those things away. But all in all, I've decided to vote yes in that spirit. I know you don't get everything that you want, but as members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, where we try to do things also in a bipartisan way, I appreciate what the two gentlemen here are doing in a bipartisan way. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Mast of Florida.
Thank you, Chairman.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And Mr. Speaker, I rise also today in full support of the Defense Authorization Act. This bill delivers exactly what America has needed: bombs and bullets from America for America. But it also does something very important to me as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. It rebuilds American foreign policy. What does it do on that front? The NDAA, it reauthorizes 3 parts of the State Department's biggest branches: political affairs, management, and public affairs. Now, in the past, less than 15% of the State Department has been authorized. This takes that number to about 40%, and we're ready to do more work on that front as we move into the next year. This NDAA, it also modernizes the Development Finance Corporation so that America, not China, can set the pace for global investment. It expands our loan program from $60 billion to $205 billion. That is a really big deal to get America out there on the world stage. And also with this NDAA, as many know, we are repealing sanctions on Syria that were placed there because of Bashar al-Assad and his torture of his people. And we're giving Syria a chance to chart a post-Assad future. We do that while also holding the new government accountable for its actions and giving the White House the flexibility that the White House needs to reimpose sanctions if the President views it necessary to do so. Finally, as was mentioned already, and very importantly, we are scrapping the old 1991 and 2002 Iraq War authorizations. We are taking the State Department from a place that was an unaccountable liberal slush fund in many cases to a place that has true accountability, where the dollars that go through that place will not simply be burned, which is what was happening in the past. And in that, I thank everybody for their work to create a better State Department. And Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm now pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
Gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today as we debate the NDAA to highlight the important wins for New Mexico, even as we are investigating reports of unlawful strikes in the Caribbean. But I do want to applaud the bipartisan work that produced some major wins for my district and for New Mexico, including a long overdue 3.8 pay raise for all military personnel, authorization of funding for Kirtland Air Force Base, and language, which I am most grateful for, to hold the Department of Defense accountable for cleaning up munitions and unexploded ordnance on tribal lands, including in Isleta Pueblo. It also authorizes funding to stand with our allies in Europe against Russian aggression and strengthens our critical partnerships with allies in the Indo-Pacific. So while I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for your great work in achieving these wins, we will continue to hold this administration accountable. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to an outstanding and very passionate member of the Armed Services Committee, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
And thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers and Speaker Mike Simpson. I am grateful to support the National Defense Authorization Act. I appreciate House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mike Rogers for his success for Peace Through Strength, working together with the ranking member, Adam Smith. I am grateful that language that I propose to support missions at the Savannah River site and nuclear modernization. The two-site solution shows American commitment for peace through strength. Support the defense programs at universities like the University of South Carolina have provided for promotion of academia and national security together. With President Trump's envoy, Tom Barrack, history is being made today for the repeal of the Caesar Act, giving Syrians a chance for, after 54 years of Ba'athist socialist dictatorship, a message to the dictators in Tehran. Finally, enhancing security ties with European allies to defeat war criminal Putin keeps American families safe at home. I encourage my colleagues to support the bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the House HASC Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, Mr. Norcross of New Jersey.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to commit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would offer this motion with an important amendment to this bill. The amendment would talk about the very issue that I spoke about earlier. President Trump earlier this year launched one of the largest attacks on labor in U.S. history by signing an executive order to strip federal workers of their collective bargaining rights. For more than 60 years, federal agencies under both Democrat and Republican administrations have recognized these rights, the rights that give workers a voice in the workplace. The one thing that Trump went and said is that we're trying to keep the Department of Defense from striking workers. This has always been illegal. There has never been a strike at the Department of Defense by the civilian employees. It is banned. It does not impact national security. It is clear that this union-busting tactics by the union buster-in-chief. I was a union electrician, and I'm co-chair of the Labor Caucus. I know firsthand how important collective bargaining rights are. It gives a voice to those workers. In a time where we're trying to encourage people to go to work for the Department of Defense, this is a way to try to keep them away because they don't have a voice. It's key to securing fair wages, a safe workplace, and dignity on the job. That executive order Over 1 million federal employees were impacted by this, including the Department of Defense. Unions, the collective bargaining agreement, were created by a vote of the workers. By a vote. They voted overwhelmingly. President Trump's executive order seeks to silence those workers by overriding this sacred vote. It really brings a new meaning to when President Trump says, "Stop the steal." So, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment, and I ask my colleagues please join me in voting for this motion to commit.
Without
I
objection.
yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Ezell.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of S. 1071, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2025. This bipartisan legislation includes the Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025. This bill supports the efforts of the Coast Guard to protect American waters, interdict drugs, stop human trafficking, promote maritime safety, and save lives at sea. The Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2025 authorizes funding for the Coast Guard through fiscal year 2027 and makes critical investments to enable the service to meet its growing mission demands. I appreciate the work of Chairman Graves on this legislation, along with Ranking Member Larson and Subcommittee Chairman Carbajal. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from
May I
Washington.
inquire as to how much time each side has
Gentleman
left?
from Washington has 7.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Alabama has 5.5 minutes remaining.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to an outstanding freshman member of the House Armed Services Committee, Mr. McGuire of Virginia.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member, for your leadership. And Mr. Speaker, as a Navy SEAL veteran, I'm incredibly proud to rise today in support of the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. This transformative piece of legislation delivers on the peace through strength mandate for this administration. This bill we're voting on today stands as a once-in-a-generation reform on the Department of War's acquisition procedures to ensure that the warfighter and services that the right equipment in a timely and expeditious manner for the fight in this moment and the future. God forbid we have to go to war. We want our men and women to be able to win the fight and return home safely. I promised when I took office to deliver for the Virginia 5th District, and this bill does just that with more for the Commonwealth, supporting the growing nuclear industry, advancing manufacturing, and workforce development sectors. It also takes necessary steps to address the extraordinary threats in the cyber domain posed by AI and quantum computing. Thank you to the committee staff and my own for their hard work on this year's bill, and I encourage all of my colleagues to vote yes. And with that, I yield back.
Now reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
I have no speakers. You have one more. Okay. I reserve. Thank you.
Gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Herodopoulos.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the NDA, which designated to strengthen federal authorities in detecting and mitigating dangerous drone activities. Unmanned aircraft systems, while offering significant potential and innovation, also present a clear and present risk to the public. This issue is especially urgent in Florida, which is the home to some of the busiest seaports in America. Drone attacks on a major seaport would pose serious threat to our national security, and I appreciate the good work done in the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of our time. And the first thing I want to do, we have mentioned repeatedly acquisition reform, which is such a huge part of this bill, such a major undertaking, and it took a long time. We did a lot of meetings with a lot of different defense contractors, think tanks, former people at the Pentagon, to really get an understanding of exactly what's going on so that we could fix it. And fix it means moving faster, getting more innovative technologies more quickly. But there are two people, The staff on the House Armed Services Committee is outstanding. Collectively, I thank all of them. I cannot possibly name all of them, but I really do want to name Phil McNaughton and Lynn Williams, who are the two members of the staff who worked on acquisition reform, worked on all those nitty-gritty details that are very difficult to understand to help us produce such a great product. So I want to publicly thank both of them for their incredible work on this issue. I do support this bill. That does not mean that I don't have concerns. I do. The biggest concern I have is that the Pentagon being run by Secretary Hegseth and by President Trump has simply not been accountable to Congress or accountable to the law. I mean, I guess it started with Signalgate when Secretary Hegseth put on an unsecure channel sensitive classified information that could place our troops at risk. The Inspector General did a report on that that concluded exactly that Secretary Hegseth had unnecessarily placed our troops at risk. His response to this was to say, I'm completely exonerated, no problem. Didn't even try to fix it. And also, this Pentagon, unlike any Secretary of Defense that I've dealt with, simply has not given Congress the information we are supposed to receive and given us the ability to do the level of oversight that we're supposed to do. Now, in this bill, I mentioned there are things that try to force that forward, and I think that's a positive step. It's not enough. To begin with, it is in the law that you are supposed to transmit execute orders when the White House tells the Pentagon what it wants to do to Congress. It's in the law. Within 30 days, you have to do that. It's not really complicated. It's not a big deal. They just don't do it. And we've been asking over and over again. The lack of respect for the law out of this Pentagon is a huge problem. And let's start with actually one other fact. It is the Department of Defense. It is not the Department of War. The law is very clear on that point. We passed a law that called it the Department of Defense. Now, if you want to call it the Department of War, I think that's a god-awful idea for a whole bunch of different reasons. But okay, come back to Congress, let's do it. They didn't do that. They just changed it because the law doesn't matter to them. And that has implications. It causes problems. We are supposed to do our oversight for a reason. And some of those problems are bore out in a variety of different ways. We have the National Guard engaged in domestic law enforcement all across this country. They're not trained for that. They're not supposed to be doing it. It's a violation of the Posse Comitatus law, and it's bad policy. But it also means that the National Guard can't do the job that we're actually paying them to do, which is to train service members to be ready for the fight. They don't have any training dollars. I met with the TAG, the Adjutant General for the state of Washington, but they told me they're not able to train because all that money is going to have our National Guards members stay in hotel rooms all around Washington, D.C., Memphis, Los Angeles, New Orleans. And that is something that shouldn't be happening, and we should have greater accountability. I'm also concerned about this whole issue of merit. You know, we've heard that we have to get rid of DEI because it undercuts merit. And yet we have generals, inspector generals, judge advocate generals being fired all over the Pentagon without explanation. Many of them clearly highly qualified people. C.Q. Brown, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Houck, who was the head of the Cyber Command and NSA Combined Command. Very talented people. Was that based on merit? There's no merit involved in that. That's about loyalty to Donald Trump. Laura Loomer shows up in the White House and says, I don't like this guy, and he's out. So if we're going to have merit, merit can't mean we're going to make sure that nobody who isn't a straight white man ever gets any possible advantage. That's not merit. All right? That's a built-in bias that focuses on loyalty, not on ability. And I also want to say I don't love DEI programs. You can read anything I've had to say about this. I am concerned about the way it has been implemented. But the idea that we ought to work to make sure that every corner of our country is represented in our military, I support. And there has been bigotry and bias and racism and sexism that has made that difficult. And we ought to try to undo that so that we can access all of the talent in this country. And saying that we're going to get rid of all of that in favor of merit that just happens to focus on people who are blindly loyal to Pete Hegseth and President Trump, that's not merit. I should clarify, I'm not opposed to DEI programs. I'm opposed to bad DEI programs, and we ought to excise those. But we don't do enough here, I think, to correct those problems as we move forward. And I'm saving the worst for last. stumbling into wars. Why does all that stuff matter? Accountability, oversight, the people's house having a say in all this? Because that way we don't stumble into bad decisions. And we're about to do that. We've already done that in Latin America right now. We have launched a war against narco-terrorists. President Trump ran on wanting to stop endless wars. You talk about an endless war, treating every single person who is a drug trafficker as a legitimate target for killing, is an endless war, and a war without authorization or proper legal authority. That lack of accountability and that lawlessness has consequences. And now, as someone mentioned, we are hearing that we have seized a Venezuelan oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, and the president has spoken frequently about his desire for a regime change in Venezuela. That should not be happening. That's not the policy that we should be headed towards. We shouldn't be wanting to go back to the 19th century where powerful countries simply took what they could and there was no international law. So I have a lot of things that I'm concerned about. This bill, even if we did it perfectly, could not fix all of that. And the reason I want people to vote for this bill is because we need to reassert the authority of Congress. That whole string side of things that I just listed that we're concerned about, one of the biggest things about that is Congress needs to exist. We need to be a co-equal branch. We need to do our job, in which place President Trump puts us in a fiendishly difficult position. He disregards us, abuses us, does all this other stuff. And then if we pass a bill, well, eventually he has to sign it. So it's like, well, should we do that? But if we don't, then we're completely out of the picture. And this bill, and this I will give a sincere, compliment and thank you to Chairman Rogers. He worked with us in a legitimate bipartisan way. There are things that are not in this bill that Republicans wanted in the bill. We got those out because we wanted a bipartisan product. This is a bipartisan project that starts moving us in the right direction. Does it stop all those bad things that President Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing right now? No, but it really couldn't. It's a step in the right direction towards reasserting the authority of Congress, which is but one step along a very long road, I will grant you, to try to get some restraint on the lack of transparency, the unaccountability, and the problems that are coming out of this White House and this Department of Defense that is creating all of these problems. So I hope we'll vote for this bill, and I hope we will continue working to do more oversight of the Pentagon going forward. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to take a minute to thank the ranking member. As anybody who's listened to this debate can just tell, he is a very bright, very thoughtful, articulate fellow. And I'm very fortunate that he's my partner in running the Armed Services Committee. I also want to thank Chairman Roger Wicker, the Senate Armed Services Committee, and Ranking Member Jack Reed. They also are very passionate, thoughtful, bipartisan members of Congress. And this product that we bring before the House today is a result of this bipartisan, bicameral effort. And for those of us who have been around here a long time, we used to see more of this. We don't now. And so it's refreshing to see this kind of effort, this kind of product come to the floor in these more recent years of toxicity in this town and in this chamber. But that toxicity is not reflected in this product. I also want to thank our staff for their outstanding work. This is literally a cumulative product of 11 months of a lot of hard staff work. The House Legislative Council, the CBO, and the parliamentarians staff here. Leadership staff, as we saw just before this came to the floor. There's been a lot of people pulling hard to get this done, but it's resulted in this product. And a lot of folks don't think about this, but this authorization bill is a massive piece of legislation, not just including what's riding along with it today from other committees, but in and of itself, it authorizes over half of all discretionary spending. This is a big deal. But it also has been done for 64 consecutive years. No matter which party has control of the White House, and no matter which party has control of this chamber, we find a way to make sure our service members have what they need to be successful and safe. So I'm very proud of this committee. I'm very proud of this product. I'm proud of the partnership that we have had with the other party, and it is an important bill. I urge our members to be supportive of it and to vote yes. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, or Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 936, previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
An act to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to disinter the remains of Ferdinand V. Cota from Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery, Texas, and for other purposes.
For what purposes, gentlemen from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to commit at the desk.
Clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Norcross of New Jersey moves to commit the bill Senate 1071 to the Committee on Armed Services.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to commit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
I ask for nays.
For what
and
purposes,
yeas.
gentlemen from New Jersey seek recognition?
I ask for nays and yeas.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess for a period of less than 15 minutes.